So Kadary Richmond chooses St. John's. Where does Syracuse basketball go from here?
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day, and we're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. On today's episode, we are joined by Mike McAllister. Once again, he is the publisher of Syracuse on 24/7 Sports. We're going to go over Kadary Richmond and Dakota LaFew, Jordan Ivy Curry, what happened with those guys, how Syracuse can fill their last three remaining scholarship spots, and more transfer portal updates as well. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. Game off. We got to talk more about Monopoly Go. This fast-paced game lets you team up with friends for tournaments to unlock awesome prizes like unique stickers for trading, cool playing pieces, and hilarious emojis for taunting your friends. So go download Monopoly Go, now free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. All right, Mike, thank you so much for joining us here on this evening. And so let's just get right to it. I mean, how involved was Syracuse with Kadary Richmond?
They were very involved. And if you read ESPN's article where they interviewed him to announce his commitment, that article specifically mentioned Syracuse was one of a few schools that was under consideration. The rumblings behind the scenes were that if Syracuse could get through him visiting St. John's, that means that there was a good chance he was going to come visit Syracuse before making a decision, which would obviously give SU a great chance to land him. That obviously didn't happen. St. John's was able to seal the deal before he could, get away from them and take another visit or two. But Syracuse was involved. They had conversations with Kadary. They wanted Kadary. There's no question about that. His primary recruiter when he originally committed to Syracuse out of high school was Alan Griffin. They had a strong relationship. That relationship remained strong. That certainly helped Syracuse. But it was after St. John's missed on several of their other top targets, they were going to be pretty aggressive, and that means probably overpay in order to make sure they could get a splash landing like Kadary Richmond to sort of save face a little bit, because they have missed on several of their top targets that were rumored to be locks for them and still ended up going somewhere else.
Well, Mike, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because one guy that they were after and they did successfully land, and this is where kind of the rumors really started to percolate, was when Utah transfer Davon Smith, who's another four-star top guard in the portal, decides to commits to St. John's. So how did that factor into Kadary Richmond's decision? I know ultimately he committed there, but how much of a role did that play in that?
Well, I'm sure that gave him a little bit of pause, at least initially, but, part of a recruiting pitch from a coaching staff, it was Rick Pitino's job and that coaching staff's job to talk to Kadary and make sure that he knew, even though we have this other player who, maybe plays your position, this is still the plan for you. This is how you're still going to play 30 plus minutes a game and have a big impact on our team and on our season and showcase your talents to get you ready for the next level. And obviously they were able to do that. Now, I know that there were some conversations among fans and et cetera that Rick Pitino has had two point guards that he started before and won a national championship with, even though that was later vacated, with Russ Smith and Peyton Siva. Those were two point guard type guards that started in the backcourt, played together, and were obviously very successful. Now, I'm not sure that members of the media should be sort of doing that PR for him and sort of putting out those statements. And I saw that a little bit, which was odd, but regardless, I'm sure that was part of Coach Pitino's pitch is, look, I've had two elite point guards before. I've played them together, and Kadary being 6'6" helps, because he can play the 1, the 2, or the 3 and handle himself defensively. And then that gives you so much versatility in terms of ball handling, who can bring the ball up the court, combating opposing teams trying to press you, getting out into the fast break, because Kadary is such a good rebounder for his position. And, he can get a rebound, be down there guarding a small forward, grab a rebound over him, and then turn it up and start a fast break because of his point guard ability. So it gives them a lot of versatility. There's no question. And I'm sure all of that was part of the pitch and why despite the fact they got another elite point guard, he still felt comfortable enough to commit there.
So how much do you think NIL played a factor into this? And I wonder if maybe, is it time to panic with Syracuse regarding NIL? Because a lot of people say they keep missing out on a lot of these guards. And is it because Syracuse doesn't necessarily have the money, or they're not willing to spend the money that they do have?
So I think it's fair to have some concern simply because we don't know what the actual numbers are. So I'm not privy to how much money Syracuse can offer a player. Now, my understanding is, yes, the NIL, I don't know if you say requirements, but the asking from Kadary's side of things was going to be high. But I don't believe Syracuse would have been one of the few schools he was considering unless they were able to at least get close enough to the numbers he was looking at to be one of the schools involved in potentially getting a visit. So I think the fact that they were one of the few schools should be encouraging that they've got NIL to compete. And yes, they also missed on Dakota LeFew. But really, other than those couple of guys, the other guys they've targeted, they've gotten. Eddie Lampkin was the top target for the center spot. They got him. At forward, they really just needed someone who could kind of play a little 3, play a little 4, and was comfortable being a backup next season because you had Donnie Freeman coming in. And they got Jair Davis, who was averaging almost 18 points a game at Delaware last season. And then they wanted a pure traditional pass first point guard, and they got that in Jaquan Carlos. So again, I know that they targeted Kadary Richmond and didn't get him. I know they targeted Dakota LeFew and didn't get him. But I think the LeFew thing, he wanted to play at close to home. And he's able to do that by playing at Georgia. That's a huge factor there. The money thing, I don't think that was strictly he just went with who gave him the most money. I think he went close to home, and I think the money from what Syracuse was offering versus other schools offering was pretty similar. But yeah, I think without knowing what the actual numbers are, I understand the concern. But last year Syracuse made a huge splash in the transfer portal. That's true. AJ Starling, he was one of the top transfers around, and Syracuse got him and wrapped him up really quickly. And I don't think you get that guy, and I don't think you're able to get guys like Donnie Freeman, 5-star McDonald's All-American type recruits, unless your NIL situation is at least pretty solid.
And one thing about JJ Starling, because I know people are going to comment and be like, well, he's from the area. Well, I don't care how much you're from the area. Money talks. So yes, there is comfort, but at the same time, if there's a big disparity in money, it doesn't matter how close you might live to home. You can live in your mother's basement. It doesn't matter.
Kadary Richmond visited Oklahoma.
Yeah. If the money is far off, money talks. And with Dakota LeFew, it sounds like from what you're saying, it wasn't really necessarily a money thing. It was more of, hey, the money was close. And then that's when the comfort of being home comes into play. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're earning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit. Only available to U.S. customers. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're joined by Mike McAllister, the publisher of Syracuse on 24/7 Sports. We're breaking down Kadary Richmond's commitment to St. John's. Syracuse missed out on him. And, of course, a little bit of Dakota LeFew. I want to touch base with you a little bit on Jordan Ivy Curry. There was a report that Syracuse reached out to what degree did Syracuse have interest in the UTSA transfer? And that's really what I'm asking. Like, how much interest did they really have? Because they didn't crack the final 3 schools for him.
So they had a couple of conversations with him and spoke to him about the school and the tradition and how they think his skill set would fit, and all of those types of things. So there was at least some level of interest. And my understanding from Jordan Ivy Curry is he had mutual interest in Syracuse as well. But when they got to the point where it was time to sort of finalize visits, the communication sort of ceased a little bit. So that tells me that Syracuse had some interest, but it wasn't, maybe they were in like with him, but not in love with him, I guess, if you want to put it that way. And I have a feeling that if they loved him and thought he's the guy we need to have on our roster, that they would have at least gotten a visit. And so the fact that they didn't crack the top 3, that means perhaps they thought that they had a real shot with Kadary Richmond. Perhaps, that they elect to try to, I don't know, pick things back up with him if they decide that he's the next best option. Ultimately, though, I think he's probably going to pick one of those 3 schools he's visiting this week. And I think the fact that Syracuse did reach out, I would imagine that what happened with him, which is you reach out, you have a couple conversations with him, and then things sort of go their separate ways, happens dozens of times with every school across the country. So I don't think it's that abnormal. It's just Coach Autry's staff has done a tremendous job at keeping a lot of their cards close to the vest. So we only hear small little things here and there when, a transfer portal Twitter account says these schools have contacted so-and-so. And that's really the only insight we get until a visit is set up. So I don't think the communication there is that uncommon. I just think it means that Syracuse is most likely going to go in another direction.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense, because it kind of, again, it came out of nowhere where all of a sudden there was this report about Jordan Ivy Curry, and I hadn't heard anything about him. One other guy I want to touch base with you on is Ken Evans. There was nothing really concrete that I could gather on him. It was more like Instagram posts and everything like that. Can you speak on that a little bit about Ken Evans?
Yeah, the Ken Evans thing was kind of interesting in that his situation was that Eddie Lampkin posted something on his Instagram story that said basically, come on down, or you're next, or something like that. And so that meant that a lot of people thought Syracuse was legitimately interested. And so I did talk to a couple of people who confirmed that there was some interest from Syracuse's side of things, but that was really all I got. I didn't really get any other information as far as, where there's serious interest, setting up a visit, anything like that. I never got anything detailed beyond that. And so I think it's just one of those things where everyone ran with the fact that, there was that Instagram story from Eddie Lampkin, and people kind of read into it a little bit, but nothing really materialized. And I haven't heard anything as far as a visit being set up, renewed interest, or anything like that. And that kind of, I think, tells you that he's not likely the guy that they're looking at. Now, they could, of course, always renew things. That's always a possibility. You can always pick the phone back up, and
we missed on Kadary,
so to speak. Yeah,
we missed on Kadary, Ken.
We missed on Kadary. Now come back to us. Obviously you wouldn't say it like that, but that's always possible. So, yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things where there's interest, right? And you see that, and you try to get some information, but I was never able to get any direct information that there was a visit set up. It was really overly serious. My guess is it was probably similar to what we saw with Jordan Ivy Curry, which is Syracuse had conversations with him. There was some interest with him, and it kind of ended there. So
got it.
Now I do have some breaking football news if you'd like it.
Why not? Why not? We love breaking news here.
Okay, so Louisville transfer cornerback Marcus Washington has committed to Syracuse football. He is a former 4-star recruit, started his college career at Georgia and transferred to Louisville. But when he did sign with Georgia out of high school, his primary recruiter was one Fran Brown. So he played primarily special teams last year at Louisville, but has transferred again, and now he is coming to Syracuse.
Wait, so what was his name again?
Marcus Washington. Now, for those trying to look up Marcus Washington, I will warn you, there are several Marcus Washingtons.
I'm looking up Marcus Washington, Louisville.
Yeah, so the one that kept coming up for me, and I just tweeted it out for anyone listening, you can go to my Twitter account. But
I'm going to go tweet right now. He just broke the news on my channel.
So when I first started typing Marcus Washington and trying to figure out who this guy was, he visited this past weekend. I kept coming up with a wide receiver at Nebraska. So there's other Marcus Washingtons out there, but this is a Marcus Washington who played at Louisville last year, was at Georgia before that, 6'1", 185-pound corner, originally a 4-star recruit, ranked 155th overall by 24/7 Sports, ranked the 21st cornerback in the country, and had offers from Arkansas, Florida State, Georgia Tech, LSU, NC State, Oregon, West Virginia, and others in addition to Georgia out of high school.
Sounds like a good player, I guess. I haven't ever really heard of him in a standpoint. I mean, how do you see him filling in this depth chart so far with the cornerback room?
Well, the one thing I've noticed that they've done with the cornerback room is they are looking for length and athleticism, and you can see that with a lot of the defensive backs that they're recruiting out of high school as well in the 2025 and 2026 classes. They're looking for track stars, guys that have big time speed, and they've recruited to that. So I think with his length and the talent is obviously there with that recruiting ranking, right? That didn't just go away. So this tells me that Fran Brown still believes there's untapped potential there and there's untapped talent, and he can come in and fit into the rotation in year one. And because I believe he's got 2 years of eligibility left.
Yep.
I'm sorry, he's got 3 years of eligibility left from what I understand.
Okay.
So because I think he redshirted year one at Georgia. So
got it.
He's got 3 years of eligibility left. He can come in, be part of the rotation year one. And then Fran Brown has a reputation of being a really strong defensive backs coach. He can then, develop him, and, maybe by year 2, he's one of your primary starters. So I think he fits in real well. I think he fits in not only this coming year, but fits into the future plans as well. And he's just another guy who fits the mold of what Fran Brown and Syracuse are looking for at the cornerback position, which is they want length, athleticism, and speed. Yep,
he's 6'1", 185, top recruit, like you mentioned a couple years ago. So obviously he was recruited by Georgia and Fran Brown. So it makes a lot of sense that if he wants to, I guess this is the way to phrase it, that's not necessarily in a harsh way, but kind of renew that athleticism, renew that career. This seems like a perfect spot for Marcus Washington. So obviously we will monitor that. And thank you so much for breaking the news right here on the channel, Mike. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. It worked out perfectly timing wise. So thank Marcus for his perfectly timed commitment.
All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You already talked about that. But there's just so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get. Unique stickers you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes. Cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with. Hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique minigames like digging for treasure or a robot panico machine, and there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go, so get off the bench and go download it now, free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. Wouldn't it be great if you could see all of your investment and retirement accounts in one place? With Yahoo Finance, you can consolidate your views from multiple accounts into one hub and access the expert analysis you need to tend to your entire portfolio with confidence. I have an investment account with Schwab and 401k, Fidelity, and I've been using Yahoo Finance to consolidate them in one place, which has made it incredibly easy to manage them. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Whether you're a seasoned investor or are looking for that extra guidance, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools and data you need in one place. They are the number one finance institution producing a holistic look at the financial news cycle, including breaking news, original editorial perspectives, analyst ratings, independent research, customizable charts, and so much more. Securely link your brokerage accounts for a unified view of your wealth, including 401k and other investments. A comprehensive perspective is what sets apart great investors, and it's how Yahoo Finance ensures you have the insight to look at your wealth in its entirety. With a community of over 90 million users each month, their real strength is helping you on your way to financial success. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com, the number one financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That's yahoofinance.com. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Thank you so much to Marcus Washington on that, and yeah, that's it. That's pretty cool, of course. So we'll go now back to basketball. And Syracuse Basketball does have 3 open scholarships remaining. Mike, how do you see them using them?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is just because they missed on Kadary Richmond and they've missed on Dakota LaFew, I don't think that means they're necessarily going to stop looking at guards, but I don't think they have to force it. And part of the reason why is you look at the guards they have in place. They've got Jaquan Carlos. They've got Kyle Cuff. They've got J.J. Starling. They've got Elijah Moore coming in. Chance Westry is still on the roster. If Chance Westry is healthy all season next year, I don't think they need anybody else. I think they've got a really good group because I think Westry can play the 1, the 2, or the 3, and he gives you a lot of versatility there. So, but he's a giant question mark because he hasn't played in a couple of years and he's had those injury issues. So that is a real concern, a significant concern. And so I think that's why Syracuse is going to continue to look for another guard. I also think they're going to look at another center. Now, it's challenging to try to find a center in the transfer portal that you can say, hey, come in and compete to be the backup. And if you don't win that, you're going to be the 3rd string center. So that's what you're transferring into. You have no chance to start. Now, if you can find a guy with 2 to 3 years of eligibility left and you can say, come in and be a backup for a year and then you'll have a chance to compete for the starting job, maybe you can get someone that way. Perhaps you can find a junior college player who's more willing to take on a reserve role because junior college players are often overlooked because of the transfer portal and how that has taken such center stage in recruiting. So I think a big is certainly on their wish list. The 3rd scholarship, again, I don't think it's one where they're going to find someone just to find a body, but if they could find someone who could be a backup small forward to give them more depth there, again, because of the Chance Westry injury history, and if he goes down, you really now don't have much of a backup for Chris Bell, or if you decide to play Jair Davis there, you've lost any outside shooting whatsoever. Jair Davis has a tremendous mid-range game, but he's only like a 27% three-point shooter. He's not someone you're going to come in and play extended minutes for Chris Bell because you lose your best shooter, and you bring in someone who's not going to scare the defense at all with Jair Davis, at least from the outside. So I think finding a wing who can shoot the ball a little bit would be, in a perfect world, would be the way that I would go at it. So I think if you're looking at it from a fan perspective, how are they going to fill those 3 scholarships? It's try to find a guard, especially someone that can play the 1, try to find a wing that can play the 3, and then look for a big that can be a backup and give you some depth there for this coming season.
It's interesting that you mentioned that. That seems right in line with what I have been saying. So either Syracuse is listening to my podcast or they're just smarter than I am. I'm going to go with the latter, that they're probably just smarter than I am.
They're listening. They're listening.
They have to. I am the general manager, okay? I'm the general manager of Syracuse Basketball. I pretend that we have an unlimited budget, and my plan one day is to become a billionaire so NIL doesn't become a problem anymore. But regardless, I digress. It's interesting that you mentioned a backup big man, because I've spoken about it a couple of times on the channel, where they have Eddie Lampkin and they have Nnamoko, but you're one pulled hamstring away from having one center. So you do need that third player. And one guy that they are targeting apparently is Georgia State big man, Edward Nnamoko. He's 6'10". I mean, to what degree of interest does Syracuse have in him?
Yeah, so he's the report was that Syracuse is one of the schools that has reached out. Now he's kind of fills, if the interest was legitimate and Syracuse decided to bring him up for a visit and try to get him to commit and join the roster, he sort of fits exactly what we just talked about, which is he's got 2 years of eligibility left. He has been a reserve at his previous stop, but he'd be jumping up a level from Georgia State to Syracuse in terms of the level of competition. So would he be more willing to take on a reserve role and then have the ability to potentially compete for that spot next year, especially because some of the reports that I read about him were that he was really starting to develop and earning more minutes for Georgia State as the season went along last year. So is there some potential there that he could continue to develop and actually be someone who contributes for you? I get it from Syracuse's perspective with what they have to pitch in terms of role. That's the type of player you're going to get. Someone with multiple years of eligibility left who has some upside and might be willing to play a reserve role year one and compete for bigger minutes year two. If William Patterson hadn't left, then that's exactly what he would be doing. So it kind of fills in a similar role. And so I see why that would make sense.
Yep. I agree with you. And I looked at, it was the report from the portal report that came out and the other schools that are targeting him. If Syracuse misses out, I just want to be very clear. I'm going to read the schools just in case people haven't seen it, but they are Louisiana, and I don't mean LSU. I mean Louisiana, Elon, Longwood, UNCA, FIU, Chattanooga, Alabama State, FAMU, UT Arlington, and New Mexico State. So to be clear, if he doesn't choose Syracuse, it is one of two options. It was it was just one option. He probably wanted a place where he would start instead of being a reserve. Not that Syracuse does not have the NIL to afford him, because the competition is not very steep. If Syracuse really wants him, they're probably going to get him if they really, really want him. But
yeah, I mean, that's with a guy like that, that's pretty much where you're at. It's one of two things. Either one, he wants to start and play big minutes next year. And so Syracuse, almost no matter how much money they threw at him, unless they threw just an absurd amount, which you wouldn't do.
Which they wouldn't. Right.
Which you wouldn't do for what you're, a third string center potentially. That situation is going to be almost similar to, I know there was a report that, my report actually, that a transfer quarterback from Pittsburgh, Christian Valou, had visited Syracuse. And he ends up committing to, ironically, Georgia State. And so you say, well, how does Syracuse lose a recruit to Georgia State? Well, the answer is simple. Syracuse has Kyle McCord. So, the path to starting this season was not there for him. Whereas Georgia State can look at him and say, if you come here, you're the guy. And so it would be a similar thing here, where if he elects to go to one of those other schools, it's because they're saying, if you come here, you're going to be the guy, and Syracuse can't promise that.
Right. One guy I want to touch on quickly is Quadir Copeland. So a little bit of Syracuse in-house news here. He's still in the transfer portal.
He is.
And I know that it seemed like it was a mutual breakup between the two. Yeah. And he posted on Instagram like peace out, a picture of the dome and everything like that he's gone. What's going on with him? Why can't a guy like Quadir Copeland find a new home?
Well, so I think he's kind of in an interesting spot because he never was at Syracuse a starter and one of the primary guys, right? Or if he wants to be a point guard, for example, he was never a starting or even one of the primary point guards at Syracuse. He kind of played a little 1, a little 2, a little 3, and a little 4. He kind of moved all around, and that has value. The problem is if he wants to continue to play at the high major level, does someone have a starting spot for him at the position he wants? That's, I think, where he sort of has to make the decision. Am I willing to take a starting spot at a different location or at a different level, like a G5 school as opposed to a Power 5 school? Is he willing to do something like that where he's the guy and there's no question that he's the guy and he's getting 30 plus minutes a game? Or is he willing to take on maybe a similar role to what he had at Syracuse, but maybe a little bit more consistent in terms of minutes at a Power 5 institution? So I think all of that and seeing what opportunities he has is really where it's sort of an interesting dynamic. And I just have no idea where it's going to go. I could see a number of circumstances in terms of where he ends up. But he's ultimately going to be the one that has to make those decisions. And, perhaps he sort of waits things out and sees some, teams that miss out on some of the guys that they wanted, and maybe similar to a Syracuse and Kadary Richmond type of situation, but with another school that was after someone like that. And with a lot of the players in the portal, they're more highly touted players in the portal finding homes, perhaps someone circles back and finds one for him, and being patient can end up benefiting him in the long run.
You know what? Syracuse is one of those schools that missed out on a guard, like you just said.
I don't see that happening, though.
I know it was a mutual breakup, but it just makes so much sense if he were to come back, because I don't know where he's going to go. I don't. It's fascinating. He's in the portal, and I'm like, kind of crossing off the list here. I'm like, I don't know. I'm
surprised there's been no chatter in terms of visits or anything like that.
Nothing. And maybe something has picked up and we just don't know, because he did put that on his Instagram, and maybe there is something that is in the works there, but it's very curious that he hasn't been able to find a home. Mike, before I let you go, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I mean, I was going to add a nugget that it wouldn't surprise me if Syracuse football added another transfer soon, but that literally happened while we were airing this episode. So, I think I understand the apprehension towards where things are with the basketball team, but I do think the roster is better than what it's being given credit for. And I think everyone who's excited about the direction of Syracuse football has every right to be that. And Syracuse football fans haven't had a reason to be excited for a long time. So enjoy it, talk it up, talk about how crazy it would be if they made the playoff. Why not? Have fun. It's the off season.
You know what? I predicted 8-4. I'm not going to go higher. I'm not going college football playoff just yet. But if people are going to say that, I certainly wouldn't be mad if they made the college football playoff. And by the way, people are loving the fact that the news broke during the recording. It's pretty funny to look at all the replies and everything. I can't reply back, everyone. Right now, we're in the middle of this recording. Mike, thank you so much for taking the time to hop on the podcast. If you like what you're watching, make sure to hit that subscribe button. I will leave a link to Mike McAllister's Twitter below, as well as a link to his work. Thank you so much. If you like this video, click that like button. If you really like it, subscribe to the channel. Turn on those notifications so you know right away when I'm dropping the next episode. And who knows, maybe there will be breaking news on the next podcast that I do.